All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Sally. This is our first virtual plant clinic back with David Yost of the winter season. So we are happy to have you all back on Facebook, and I am hitting go live right now on our Facebook live stream. So welcome to everybody on Zoom, and welcome to everybody who's joining on Facebook. Quick reminders for those of you who are dialing in. If you guys have questions during the class, you're on Zoom, I can't see you or hear you. So please type those questions into the Q&A box, send them my way. And if you are on Facebook, I will be monitoring the comment section. David's going to be discussing seed starting today. So we are happy to have him back. So that we can talk about some gardening topics during the winter. So David, I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Okay, thank you, Sally, and good to see everybody. I think we last saw each other back before the holidays and then took some time off, during this winter. So hope everybody had a fantastic holiday season, starting off New Year, and you're staying inside warm and cozy. I think it was like first weekend or first Sunday in January or something, it was 60 degrees, and it's been pretty much inside weather since then. So as Sally mentioned, we try to keep this as sort of interactive as possible. So I've got some slides, a little video, some pointers to share with you regarding seed starting, but really I also build in plenty of time for questions. So submit any questions, comments, ideas, your own experiences, put all that in the chat room, and we'll certainly make time to cover all this in the next 45 minutes. So seed starting, I really like to kick this off with just sort of a word of gratitude towards plants and towards the seeds themselves. Just getting prepared for this, I kind of get overwhelmed thinking like, wow, so plants, seeds like you see here, these kind of type of seeds that we buy and plant in our garden and enjoy so much, they start showing up in the fossil records about 1 million years ago. And so it's a culmination of hundreds of millions of years in evolution that have led to this. And seeds, they're just awesome. I don't care how long you've been gardening or how new you are to gardening, they're just awesome and awe-inspiring. When you think about what really goes into a seed, you've got the plants have developed this way of taking a little embryonic plant, a little copy of themselves, packaging it up, storing a little bit of food, and then coating all this in a seed coating so that it can withstand the elements. And this is the thing that's so cool, is that seeds, the plants will produce them. They'll put them out there. That has this whole interaction that goes in with the dissemination of the seeds, how they get dispersed and find a place to eventually grow. But they can sit there and lie dormant for years and years, even thousands of years, just waiting for that opportunity when they get the right amount of sun, right temperatures, right moisture, conditions are right, and there's time, opportunity for a plant to grow. Boom, start up with a new plant that's there. So seeds are amazing and awesome. We are dependent on them. You think about so much of our culture, the development of agriculture that really leads to our existence and civilization and society. Really, thank you, plants, for all these amazing seeds. It's so critical. You probably have heard, we have like an international seed bank, up in the northern parts of Norway. We're tunneled down deep into the permafrost, into the tundra and stuff. There's actually an international seed vault. So if there was ever some type of global crisis, we actually have germplasm, and I've gotten to listen to podcasts and stuff. The people that manage that, there's a lot of work that goes into there. And that's a little bit of like preserving our own future in the case of a catastrophe. And I think that's what happens with us when we plant seeds. It's always this hopeful experience. It's looking ahead, it's preparing, it's planning for the future. And I personally think that our well-being and our history and development is so intertwined and interlocked with this that everybody likes growing plants from seed. So, bit of a long-winded introduction, but I've been doing this at different scales for many years and never get tired of it. So the real basics of this in terms of getting started and growing your plants is for most plants in a sort of a simplified version, the germination of that seed is dictated by temperature and moisture. So inside this seed, like I said, this is what they call coated seed. It's got a hard coating on that outside. And one is it needs the moisture to permeate and make its way through that coat to initiate this germination of it. And it also has to be at the correct temperature. So these seeds, basically, they sit there and they're waiting for the correct temperature and moisture to get started. So with that, I want to switch over to some pictures to kind of help you figure out the timing for your planting of seeds. Because I go back and I think that this really is one of the things that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is just not planting at the correct time. So if you can, jot this down. Remember, it's just the National Gardening Association. They have a chart that will give you your average frost date based on your zip code. So that's just at garden.org. garden.org, or if you just do an internet search under frost date by zip code, it will get you there. So what I did here was I plugged in the zip code for where I'm sitting right now for a Fair Oaks location, 22030. So what you would do is on each package of seed, if you read the instructions in here, they'll say something like, oh, plant seed 4 to 6 weeks before average frost date, or plant seed 6 to 8 weeks before average frost date, or wait till average frost date. So your planting date is established by your average frost date. And the way these numbers work, just be clear, because this is really, I think, a critical point. If I look down here, 32 degrees, that's our freezing temperature or frost date. And I scroll over, what this means is on April 10, I have a 50-50 chance of getting frost where I live here. If I continue to move over on April 12th, there's a 40%. On the 18th or the 15th, that is 30%, and so on. So when we talk about average frost dates, that normally means that on an average year, we have 50-50 odds of frost on that date. If these are tender plants, or you want to be a little more conservative, as I usually am, I'm going to bump over here more towards late April, April 18, April 20, somewhere in this date. April 20's date I normally use as my frost date, because at this point, you can still have a frost, but there's only like a 10 or 15% chance. Those options are available to you. So a lot of these frost-sensitive plants, you wouldn't actually be planting them outside until we get in pretty well into late April. And some of them, we've got to wait till that soil gets good and warm, and we're not putting them out until May. So what many of us like to do, and this is kind of the fun part, and what I'm talking to you about now in February, is we can get a head start on this. If I have to wait, so the ideal soil temperature for tomatoes, for example, is 75 to 85 degrees. That means I'm waiting until well into May before I can plant my tomato seeds. Well, nobody wants to do that. Nobody in their right mind wants to do that. So we can get a head start on this by growing our seeds indoors, develop them for several weeks. We start 6-8 weeks ahead of time, and then plant them outdoors. So a lot of you will be doing your seed starting typically in March. Some of you might be starting in February. It really depends on the crop that you're growing and where you live. So I'm going to spend the first few minutes here talking to you about steps you can take to start seeds inside, so that when the temperatures warm up, you'll actually have little transplants. You'll have 6-week or 8-week-old plants to actually put outside. So go to that website, figure out where you want to begin as far as your frost date. You're probably going to count back about 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks in there. So you're starting usually sometime in March. The basic supplies that you're going to need is pretty obviously, but you'll want some type of a seed starting mix. Of a regular potting soil will do, but if you buy a seed starter like I'm shown here. These seed starters are actually go through a finer screen. They're milled to a finer texture, so you don't get big chunks of bark or clumps of compost in there that could potentially, weigh down or smother the seeds. So a seed starter is just a finely screened kind of potting mix that's in there. These products are essentially sterile, so you start everything clean. We got to keep everything clean, both everything from our tools and the potting mix to the pots we grow them in. There's many, many different options as far as containers go. Here, what I like to use, because they're just super convenient and easy and effective and work well, are these plastic inserts. This is a little cell pack. They come in different sizes. Some of them might have 32 cells, some of them might have 48. And so what will happen, and that's all inside the humidity dome. Of course, the seeds, I should have started there. Pick what you want to grow. I mean, that's one of the best things about starting from seeds is, hey, if there's a particular flower that you like, you can pick colors, or in terms of vegetables, heirloom varieties, unique varieties. So essentially, you're just picking what you want to grow in your garden. And then, of course, so you'll have containers and you'll have potting mix. That's really all you need to get going. With the potting media, you do want to pre-moisten that. These things, they can be the peat in there can be very kind of dusty, a little bit difficult to work with. So I don't want it saturated, but I'll just spritz it with some water or just sprinkle some light water over there, mix it up a little bit. So it has a consistency, it feels like a damp sponge. And then that gets basically filled into the trays here. So everything's smoothed out and then patted down so it's firm, not compressed or anything, but just kind of settling out the air pockets. After getting your trays prepared and ready, and again, there's all different ways to do this, but this is one that I like to do. This colleague of mine, Andrea, that was demonstrating for us, she likes doing it this way also. And then she's using, she's seeding some greens, some salad greens. So in this situation, she's just kind of broadcasting these throughout over the entire tray. If you were growing, for example, something like tomatoes, you might only want to put 2, maybe even 3 seeds into each cell. Now, all the seeds that we're selling, they're all this year. They get tested for germination, proper storage, so it's fresh seed. And you should get like 90% success with it. But everybody I know puts at least 2 seeds in there, just making sure, hey, if one of them doesn't sprout for some reason, the other one does. And other people might put even 3 seeds into each cell, just as a backup plant, even though we may only finish with 1 plant. So you're basically broadcasting your seed if it's something like greens, or you might just be carefully placing them in the top. And seeds don't want to be buried too deep. After putting them in the tray, what Andrea is doing here is she's going through and just putting maybe a 1/4 inch or so of seed starter over top of them. Just enough to cover them, keep them in place, help keep them moist, because seeds also need sunlight to germinate. So if they get buried deep, if they get buried like 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches down, the sunlight doesn't get down there, and then you don't get as good a germination. So just lightly cover them. And then, as I said, it's both a function of temperature and moisture. The best way to water these is with a fine mist. If you take a watering can over there, and even if you're careful, usually you're going to be splashing soil everywhere. It's going to be running over the top of the edges and basically making a pretty big mess. So once you've got everything really well moistened, I really do like these humidity domes because we want to keep it moist. And that's all this plastic cover is. It's a cover that helps to keep the moisture in there, keep the humidity down, but still allows the light to come through. So once you have all your seed trays prepared, everything started, like I said, a couple things. I'd mentioned that humidity dome. There's different designs in here. And again, it's not required, but it makes it optional. This one, which I like because it's tall, you can see it allows more height to develop in there, and you can actually ventilate it. It has these openings here, and I did put together, but it allows you to ventilate it. So you'll be checking on your seedlings pretty much every day. That doesn't mean water them every day, but just to check on them. Because a lot of times if you have a setup like this, the condensation is in there and the water drips back down. It keeps it pretty moist. But when it does become slightly dry, you'll go back through and spritz them again. Again, if it gets really wet in here, you can always, this one has a ventilation in that, or sometimes you open the dome to ventilate it, get a little bit of fresh air going in there. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is that the second biggest problem I see is not having sufficient light, of getting started at the right time, not too early, but getting the right timing, I'm going to say is my number one kind of caution. Number two is you really need good, strong light. If you're trying to use a window, for example, I still want you to have at least like a half a day's direct light in there. All of these seeds are, or certainly by far most of them, really do well with very strong light. A lot of us don't have the windows to do that, or also in the middle of winter when the days are short, thank goodness they're getting longer. But if we don't have good lighting conditions, then you may want to think about investing in a grow light. See if I got this. Now I have it upside down. I can't see it there. Okay, so a grow light, what's different about this is it's providing the full spectrum of light. When you're sitting inside just under normal interior lighting, like an office, you probably have cool white light bulbs, fluorescent bulbs in there. They tend to be giving light that's more in the blue spectrum of the light. There are also warm white colors that tend to give off light more in the red end of that spectrum. Thing is with plants, of course, is they need both ends of that spectrum, both red and blue. So you definitely want to be using a plant light. This one that I'm showing you right here uses what they call a T5 tube. This is a very small, you might see this little skinny, it's a fluorescent bulb. So fluorescent lighting is nice because it does not give off a lot of heat, it's very energy efficient. This is very high intensity light that's produced out of a small bulb, and it gives the full spectrum that's out there. But whether you want to use an incandescent light, they're just inefficient, generate a lot of heat. So usually a fluorescent or an LED light is going to be your best option. And with LED and fluorescent, because they don't generate a lot of heat, keep them down as close as you can to the plants themselves. Because under low light levels, your little seedlings come up and they get all stretched out, they get elongated, they don't kind of have that nice stocky form to them. So lighting is a good thing to have. And yeah, you'd want to put that on a timer, really anywhere from about 10 to 14 hours a day, depending on the exact conditions that you're in there. Another optional thing, and that's what I'm calling these, is like, so the lighting is a really nice thing, but it's kind of not required. If you get into this, again, another option is basically this is a heating mat for seed starting. This has a thermostat on here that kind of controls it. I think if I remember correctly, this keeps that temperature at around 68 degrees. So if some of your plants, especially if you're doing this in a garage or a basement or a room that might be a little bit cool temperature, putting them on a heat mat that just provides a little bit of gentle bottom warmth will get your seedlings up and growing faster, and it improves your germination rate on some of these cool season plants, warm season plants. So again, this is not a requirement, but these are things you can do to kind of improve your success and improve the results with it. I've got a couple more pictures I want to go to finish out this process, and then we're going to see if we've got any questions. So let's go back to pictures. So again, this is where we left off, where we've got our seeds all prepared. With good results, you'll a lot of times, depending on the plant, you might see germination. Some things like beans and radishes and cucumbers and squash and all, you might see them sprout up and look like this in like a 5 to 7 day period. Some other things like you're growing basil, you know, it might take you more like 10 or 14 days. But these first 2 seedling leaves come up. These are not true leaves. These are what we call the seedling leaves. That's just kind of a temporary food storage supply for the plant until they get growing. When they start to reach, we call a 2 or 3 leaf seedling stage. This looks like marigolds, and these are true leaves on here. So when you get to this point where they're about 2 to 3 leaves on there, by that point, you definitely need to thin these out. Like I said, sometimes we might put 2 or 3 plants in each cell, but what we're trying to do is really just keep the strongest ones. So as they're growing and filling in, thin out the weaker ones so there's less competition. You end up with one good stocky plant that's in there. And when they reach about this 3 leaf stage, that's oftentimes when we start, we call hardening off process. These plants, they've been grown inside in a sheltered, pampered location. They're not really quite ready to go outdoors, and oftentimes the temperatures are still too cold. But at this point, if we're getting temperatures that are warm, it's staying above 50 or maybe even 60 degrees outside. You might put them outside in a sheltered area, keep them out of the wind, but we're kind of acclimating them to the outdoors life where they start getting a little more sunlight. We don't want to give them sunburn. So we gradually introduce them to the outdoors, a little bit of filtered light, a little bit of temperature variation. And it's going to take about a week, maybe even 2 weeks for these guys have really acclimated to where they can go outdoors into your garden. So Sal, that's my kind of little intro. And at this point, let's see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, we have questions coming in. So as always, everybody, just a quick reminder, if we don't get to your question today, you are welcome to follow up via email with us and we will answer your question. All right, so first one, when I buy seeds, especially for lettuce, they say they're packaged for a specific year. Is that important? Do seeds lose their potency?
Yes, so what happens, I'm glad you asked the question, because what happens, all these seeds, there's agricultural and seed laws, some of the earliest laws that go back to when we were much more agrarian society that requires us as a seller to check the germination rates, to verify that it's true to what's in the package. And that has to be dated. So from a legal perspective, we can only sell seeds that are within 12 months old. It varies a little bit state by state, but in Virginia, it's a 12-month requirement. So that it's basically a quality assurance on our part that you're getting fresh seed that will meet minimum germination rates, that's true to what's in here. And all this gets tested and inspected and periodically reviewed by the state. So that's us as a commercial vendor assuring you quality fresh seed that will germinate a minimum of 85% germination, 90% germination rates. Now, that doesn't mean that this goes bad suddenly. Like if you buy a carton of milk and it says, hey, used by, February 3rd, it could be like February 4th and suddenly that jug of milk is rotten and you're going to throw it out or something. Seeds don't do that. Seeds may gradually decline in their germination and their quality. Most of what I find, I'm pretty good. I'll keep them in a Tupperware container out of direct sunlight, preferably at about 50, 55 degree range. If you've got a garage basement environment, those are kind of ideal. And they'll hold up usually pretty reliably for 2 to 3 years. Once we start going more than 3 years out, again, it still doesn't mean that seed is bad, but by that time, I'm usually thinking, okay, for $1.79, maybe, or $2.69 in this case, maybe at that point I've got my money's worth, and I'll go get a fresh package of seeds. But yeah, they can last for years if you store them correctly.
All right, thanks, David. Next question. Can you talk a little bit about the different pod sizes when people are using those grow trays? Are there different sizes that are better for different types of vegetables or flowers? This specific person is asking about zinnia. but I think you can extend that to say, do you need different seed pod sizes?
It really depends a little bit on I say how long you want to grow that plant indoors. So a larger cell, I think the ones that you were looking at in that picture there, I think if I remember correctly, there's about 32 cells in that tray. That would be for a plant that I'm going to grow probably 8 weeks inside, kind of thing, maybe even a little bit longer than that. If I have a plant, and I'm going to use zinnia as a good example, zinnias grow so quickly and they're so prolific that I might put into a pack that holds, let's say, 48 cells. They're smaller cells. So I'm only going to hold those plants for maybe 4 weeks in there, but that's got a faster turnover there. So it really comes down to what you're growing and just how you choose to manage. It's not like a right or wrong answer. Some people will even go up into like 2-inch and 3-inch pots. Like, again, people want to get a big start on tomatoes, and you're going to start 10 weeks ahead of time. You might even put that in a 2 or 3-inch pot. So it just, you figure out what works best for you. It varies, I think, more than anything by how long you intend to hold the plants indoors.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, next question. Can you use plastic egg cartons for starter cells?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people do this, plastic egg cartons. I think it's ideal if they can drain. There's always this little bit of a dilemma where you don't want stuff running out onto your floor or countertops, but anybody's watched my plant clinics before. I really, really don't like to put anything unless it has drainage holes into it. So if I'm using a yogurt cup or an egg carton or something like that, go for it. But just let's make sure you have drainage openings in the bottom.
Got it. All right. Next question. Can you please give more specific, keep the light close to the plants? How many inches is keeping the light close?
So one of the things, again, I really like LED lighting and fluorescent light because it does not generate heat. The old incandescent bulbs, if you get them close to the plant, it can get so hot they'll burn them. But I'm usually talking within inches of as close as you can, but you still get good coverage in there. So depending a little bit on your lighting system, like if you're using a shop light that has 2 parallel bulbs, it's got a wider distribution, you might be as close as 2 to 4 inches. And that's not too close. Sometimes if you're trying to cover a bigger area, you have to raise a little higher. You might end up maybe even like 12 inches away if that's what you need basically to cover the plants. But light, it dissipates at literally an exponential rate. So as you move that light away, like the difference between 1 inch and 10 inches is like 100-fold less light intensity, if I'm doing my math correct, which isn't my expertise. So even like a couple inches, 2-3 inches, if that works for you.
All right. Thanks, David. Okay. Here's a good question because we actually had this happen to us. Once the seedlings come up, what do I do to avoid the fungus or mildew or whatever it is that kills the seedlings?
Well, again, that's one of the things I mentioned is cleanliness is really, really your very first, most important, most effective step, where that's one of the things that's nice with these potting media and everything, they're not treated with fungicides or anything, but they're basically, most of these things are peat based. So, or they're going through a process to where they're essentially fairly sterile and clean to work with. You want your pots to be clean. That's why, again, if you're doing homemade pots or something, again, make sure everything's sanitized. Maybe even if you're having problems, go to the point of doing a little bit of a 10% bleach solution to sanitize everything. So start out clean is really your best way to prevent that. Managing your moisture can be in there. I keep emphasizing that we want to keep them moist, but not soaking wet. If you start to see where it is staying too moist, you always lift the humidity dome off to kind of ventilate it, let things dry out a little bit so that they're not always constantly moist that's in there. But I'm very, very reluctant to start like recommending fungicides or anything. There are different fungicides people use for what we call collectively dampening off, but I just really don't even want to go down that road. I don't think anybody else does if they're taking the time to grow their own seedlings.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Next question is about lettuce and onions. Do you suggest planting lettuce and onions inside first, or do you prefer to plant them directly in the garden? And then they want to know when we plant lettuce in our Fair Oaks at the garden at our Fair Oaks store, if we do that. I'm not sure if we do that.
So we, you know, that on a lot of things, I do prefer what's called direct sowing. Now, I'm talking about just starting indoors, things that we can do now to have fun with this. But what you'll learn through your own gardening experience is something like lettuce. It grows so easily, quickly, prolifically, and it will germinate under cold soil temperatures. So lettuce, for example, germinates. I just happen to have that right in front of me. The ideal temperature for seed germination, I'm talking about soil temperature, is about 60, 68 degrees. So that's telling me, hey, I can plant lettuce outside, just direct sow it into the ground probably sometime in March, and it's up and growing straight out of the ground by April, and it saves me this kind of starting inside. Now, a lot of people will still like to grow lettuce started inside, only because the advantage doing that is it gives you a little bit of a head start. Maybe you can get 2 or 3 weeks growing inside before you kind of actually go outside. So either way, we of course, and we sell transplants, for people that don't, for whatever reason, don't have the time, the space, the interest, or whatever to actually start their own plants. You just come in and see us, and we sell both plants and seed. So it's personal preference. But a lot of things, hey, cucumbers, melons, greens like lettuce, so many of these things, a lot of the root crops, whether you're talking about radishes, carrots, onions, I would just start directly in the soil. I wouldn't go through this whole transplant process. Got it.
Okay. Next question is about the Jiffy peat pots. Do you like using those, or do you recommend them? Those are the ones for people who aren't aware that you plant in the ground.
So they make up, when you say Jiffy peat pots, I think of two things. One is they make a little peat cell that's literally that's compressed down. It's about the size of a silver dollar. And when you soak it in water, they kind of swell up like a sponge, and so those are used just as a convenient little place to start plants. I'm just going to tell you, personally, I'm not a fan of those. I feel it's 100% peat. There's no perlite, there's no vermiculite. It's just straight peat that's in there. And in my experience, it stays actually too wet, too dense. But other people have been successful with that, and kids always like the experience. So I don't want to say anything bad about this, I'm not a fan. If you're talking about the pots, the containers themselves are made out of compressed peat. They are fine, but the intention of those pots is that they would be decomposing. The intention of that pot is, hey, when my plant's ready to grow, I'll just stick the pot and everything in the ground. The container is going to dissolve and our plant's going to grow. I have not found that to work for me. I think those peat pots, they tend to stick around much longer than I want them to. I think they create a barrier for the plant, and they can actually kind of wick moisture out of the soil. So if I'm using a compressed peat container, I would still remove the plant or remove the container before I put it in the ground. Again, trying in all fairness, a nice thing with peat, hey, I'm using a natural product, a recycled product, something that does compost and go back into the soil. Whereas some of the stuff that I'm promoting today, I always feel a little guilty about because I'm also promoting plastics. And then we have to weigh that with the environmental cost of doing plastics. So I try to put it all out there and let you guys decide for yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. That's some good information. All right. Do you have any suggestions for a DIY seed starting mix, or is it easier to do you prefer the store bought? Is there any way to make your own?
The DIY mix, the only risks that go with that is sort of the sanitation side of it. So I've always felt more confident using one of the commercial mixes that are out there. A lot of people have really good success with their own compost, but my issue, like I'm a composter, I make compost and I enjoy it, but I'm also what I call a lazy composter. My compost production never reaches those high temperatures. I never get to 120 and 140 degrees. The commercial composters, they're managing this and they get 120, 140 degrees. And at that temperature, it kills off the pathogens, it kills off the weed seeds and everything. So if you wanted to make your own, I'd say you can just go with some compost and maybe even consider mixing a little bit of perlite in there for enhanced drainage. But just make sure you've got a good quality compost to start with. So Sal, I want to show another quick little video. All right. If we got time, and because I know it's going to generate questions on its own. So here's another thing. This is something I started playing around last year. It's not new, and it's not new to me. It's just something called winter sowing that I discovered. I'm going to show you a little video with more detail on this. And here's another real easy, fun way that I encourage you to experiment with and getting a start on your garden now.
Hi, I'm David Yost from Maryfield Garden Center, and I'm here to talk to you about winter sowing. This is a really fun, exciting, and easy way to get a head start on your spring garden. This is a method that we use to plant our seeds in the winter. This gives them time to actually sprout, grow, and then we'll have little seedlings ready to go when spring arrives. You can do this with almost any kind of flower or vegetable, even trees and shrubs, but it works best if we use plants that tolerate and actually do well with cool temperatures. So things like lettuce, spinach, bachelor buttons, even marigolds do really well with this winter sowing technique. But to do this, we actually are going to take a milk jug and turn that into a mini greenhouse. And we've got a video that's going to show you how, so let's take a look. After you've prepared your jugs, try to find a nice location that's a little bit sheltered from the wind, but where they're still going to get about 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. So up against the fence or a little wall like this is going to be ideal. And these jugs are going to sit outside all winter long. Doesn't matter how cold it gets or how much snow we get, just leave them sitting out here. And what you'll discover is, you know, the curiosity gets to you, and a lot of people start having this habit of peeking in the jugs every single day because you want to see what's happening, is anything growing. But they're all nestled in there, they're cozy, and when the temperatures get right, that's when those seeds will begin to sprout and germinate. So you don't have to check them daily, but I do want you to go in and check them at least every couple weeks to make sure that they remain moist. If it begins to come dry, that's the time when you'll need to do just a little watering, just enough to keep those jugs moist. At the same time, they're going to sit out here with the caps off of there so it's open. This allows them to ventilate, and it also does allow some moisture to get in during the rain and snow periods. So as we progress later into spring and temperatures start to gradually warm up, these seeds will sprout in their own good time when they're ready to do that. As it does get warmer and they begin to sprout, keep an eye on it, because if we jump up into warm temperatures, you may actually need to open the jugs to ventilate them. So when we get to that spring period and we have warm weather, you'll tear this tape off, you'll open it up. This will be full of little seedlings. and then just kind of keep an eye on the weather, let them develop. When they reach the 3-leaf stage, 3 or 4 leaves, and they're about that 3 inches tall, at that point, they should be mature enough and we should be well into spring that you can move them, plant them in your garden, and enjoy your fresh fruits and vegetables and flowers, whatever you've decided to plant. So make gardening fun, and anything we can do to help you here at Merrifield Garden Center, just let us know. We're always here for your questions.
Great, so that's what I brought in here to share today. We'll go back to questions. What do you think, Sal?
All right, sorry, my mouse needs new battery, so it took me a second to unmute there. All righty. Yeah, we do have more questions coming in, so we can just continue on for about 5 more minutes if that works for you. And just a quick reminder again to everybody, send us an email if you don't get your question answered. We are happy to
so your jugs. This is people. This is kind of what I started doing some of this last year, and I'm really having fun. So that's my current suggestion for everything, is doing the milk jug seeding.
Yeah, that looks fun, and like probably a great project for kids too to watch. Okay, here's a good question. When do the spring vegetables start to come into the store? And I would say, when do the seeds come into the store? When do the actual vegetables come in too?
So let me first, I'm glad you asked the question, because yeah, I'm getting tired of saying this, but we've had some disruptions getting some of our seed in here. So here at the Fair Oaks store, and I think I haven't checked the others, we've received seed from 3 of our vendors, but the other 3 vendors, we're still waiting for them to arrive. And that's really, again, I think it's issues more with shipping than it is anything else that's out there. So the seeds are coming in. We have them at all 3 stores now, but it's not a complete selection. And we're kind of like you guys, at home, checking we get deliveries every week, at least, a couple times a week, sometimes daily. We're sitting there checking every truck, hoping that the rest of them will show up any day now. So seeds are coming in now, they're in now, and more are on the way. Actual plants, it's probably not, even the cool season stuff, you're probably not going to start seeing any of that stuff arrive until March. We do keep an eye on the weather, and if, depending what the weather's doing, that will vary. From what I've seen, they're saying February is going to be another cold month. So I'm going to say we'll start getting, greens and broccoli and cabbage and kale and, all the really wonderful Brussels sprouts, all the cool weather stuff probably coming in March. I can't really even give you an exact date because that's going to depend on weather.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump to some questions that have come in about the jugs. For when you do the jugs, do you have to thin out the seedlings at any point?
So last year, just on a little trial basis, what I did is I tried, you might remember, I grew potatoes from actual seed, which is kind of a long little science project kind of thing. So in that case, I took my little seedlings from the drug, transplanted them into individual pots, and then took them from individual pots into the garden. That was making it more difficult, but that was my choice. What I'm intending to do is almost what sometimes they'll call, I think, clump planting. So when, for example, I broadcast lettuce seeds in here, this is going to grow up just like a blanket of lettuce seeds. And what I'll do is just take a little clump, I'm not individual plants, but I might take like a little spoonful and plant them here, a little spoonful, plant them here, a little spoonful, plant them there, and then kind of start gradually thinning them out.
Okay. All right. That's cool. All right. I don't see any more questions coming about the jugs. I want to try that myself. Okay.
That was going to be my answer to your question you asked before the show. I was going to try to get you to try some jugs down there in Florida.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. It's 80 degrees today. So,
well, maybe not for you.
Yeah, I don't know. You never know. It was 20 degrees 3 days ago. So, all right. Can you plant kale, spinach, and seeds now if you plant them under a frost blanket?
You could do that. I'm also going to say, hey, that's an excellent opportunity for the jugs that are here. Again, because those are cool weather plants. Eventually, if you put them in the ground, that seed will just sit there and keep it moist. And when the temperatures are right, it will begin to sprout. Under frost blanket, yeah, maybe go ahead and start now. This is awfully early. I was going to say that the safe play would be to do this in March. But you can tell I love experimenting all the time in the gardening, and I encourage it. That's the fun. So if you decide, hey, I want to try it now, go ahead and try it. I've never done that, and I never heard of anybody doing it, but it could work.
All right, great. Well, it is 2:45 now, so I want to make sure that we're staying on time. David, thank you so much for doing this. To everybody who attended, thank you so much for joining us for this first class of the first virtual plant clinic of the year. Our noon classes will be beginning on February 10th. So you can go on our website, check that out, keep an eye on email. We'll be sending more information out, and David will be doing these pretty much every other week, as he has been, selecting topics based on whatever is seasonal. So I'm not sure, David, if you know what topic is coming next, or if we're going to wait.
We're going to stay inside. Next time around, I do want to talk about indoor plants, house plants. And to remind everybody, our greenhouses are chock-a-block full of beautiful tropical plants from Florida, flowering stuff and everything. So if you get a little down to the winter weather, you come see us.
Oh, that's exciting. All righty. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We have recorded this, so please feel free to follow up and ask for that recording. And David, thank you so much. Everybody have a great day.
All right. Take care.
Please stay warm.